We're a minute past here. I think we can get started. Welcome everyone to Elevate Your Employee Resource Group, Best Practices in Mental Health Support, brought to you today by Lime Connect and NAMI-NYC. We're so excited to be here with you all. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month, and let's get started. So welcome. Thank you so much for taking your day to join us in this session. I know taking an hour for a session can be a lot, and we hope that you'll get something out of it. Feel free to ask questions and engage throughout. I know we have a lot of exciting folks joining us today who have their own experiences in employee resource groups and workplace mental health. So we're always curious to hear your thoughts and anything like that. So in a world where mental health and inclusivity are increasingly recognized as pillars of a healthy workplace, employee resource groups have really emerged as these crucial platforms where we're seeing employers being able to foster a sense of belonging and support in the workplace. Despite ERG's potentials, some organizations are still finding it hard to figure out, how to fully harness the power of these ERGs and make a tangible impact. And we are seeing so many ERGs doing tremendous things, but there's a lot to be learned. So today we're really excited to share our findings from our latest report on mental health and disability employee resource groups. And we'll kick off with introductions from our workplace. Sorry, I was just looking at the slide. We'll kick off with introductions from our event partners, Lime Connect, and tell you a little bit about the National Alliance on Mental Illness of New York City, walk through the report, and then spend most of our time discussing specific strategies for success and hear directly from two employee resource groups who are so nice to join us today. We'll close out with time for questions, but feel free to, share thoughts, questions in the chat throughout. We'd love to hear from you all today. So before we get started with our introductions, we'll launch a quick poll to see who's with us today and what your thoughts are. So if you're in Zoom, please take a few moments to answer the 3 questions in the poll that we just launched. Should be popping up on your screen. Our questions are: what best describes your relationship to employee resource groups? What strategy you're most interested in learning about today? And how comfortable you are talking about mental health in the workplace, which is a huge aspect of employee resource groups, creating space for people to feel safe and share their stories and connect with others. So, yes. Thanks everyone for filling out the poll. We're getting close. We're at 70% participated. Okay, awesome. So 80%, let's see if we have a few more folks answer here. Okay, so let's look at the results. What best describes your relationship to employee resource groups? So we're seeing a lot of members here, 42% or leaders of mental health or disability employee resource groups. We have a few folks who are part of other ERGs who are looking to incorporate mental health. We have some folks looking to start a mental health or disability ERG. And some folks who are in roles that interact with ERGs, such as HR, benefits, and DEI, and folks looking to learn more about ERGs in general. We have a strong winner. Folks are interested in identifying specific goals and using data to demonstrate the impact of their employee resource groups, which I know can be incredibly challenging. So we'll look forward to getting to that with you all today. And how comfortable is everyone? So we have a lot of comfortability being shown here about talking to mental health in the workplace, and some folks who are somewhat uncomfortable, which I definitely have experience with too. So thank you so much for sharing, and we will get into our introductions. I'll hand it over to our partner at Lime Connect, Renee, to talk a little bit about the organization.
Great. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Renee Forsyth, and I'm the Director of Professional Development for Lime Connect. And it's great to see so many of you joining us today for this discussion. For those of you who may not be familiar with who we are a not-for-profit organization, and Lyme Connect's mission is to rebrand disability through achievement. And we do that by attracting, preparing, and connecting high potential university students and professionals, including veterans, into our network. And they have all different types of disabilities. Once an individual with a disability joins our network, they are eligible to apply for different internships, leadership programs, scholarships, and full-time careers with the world's leading corporations. We are joined by many of our corporate partners here today. I've seen the registration list, so we're thrilled to have so many of you with us today. And we also support you as our corporate partners in recruiting, onboarding, developing, retaining, and promoting all your employees who have disabilities. So I will be following up with all of you, all of our corporate partners, to share more information about how you can access additional Lyme Connect resources and how you can join our ERG community group, which we're really excited about having you join. We are thrilled to be collaborating with NAMI-NYC for this event today. NAMI-NYC has been a great strategic partner of Lyme Connect for some time now, and they're really a great go-to resource for us for mental health learning and education. And when I saw the ERG study be released, I was like, we have to do something together. So I'm really excited that we were able to bring this to our corporate partners, Lyme Connect's corporate partners, and also just the broader community, because it's such an important conversation. So I know there's information that will be shared in the chat, and also follow up on how you can learn more about Lyme Connect and how you can join one of our communities. If you're joining us as a person with a disability, we encourage you to join our network. And if you are joining us as a corporate partner, we will share additional information about how to access, again, our community groups. But I'm thrilled to be here with you all, and I'm going to turn it back to NAMI-NYC and the team to learn more about the study. I'm excited. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Renee. We feel exactly the same. So thankful to be partnering with Lyme Connect and the absolutely incredible work that you all do. So my name is Elena Auerbach. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm our workplace mental health manager here at the National Alliance on Mental Illness of New York City. I'm also joined by my colleague, Rachel, who will be talking later and talking about the report today. So the National Alliance on Mental Illness of New York City has been around for about 40 years. We were started by a group of families who had loved ones living with mental illness. And now we are one of the nation's leading mental health nonprofits. And we create a community of folks who can share their lived experiences. We have everyone working here living with a mental illness or as a family member of someone who lives with a mental illness. And we believe in the power of telling our stories and using our experiences to support one another. We do this through providing several free resources, such as our helpline, which you can see the phone number and the email is listed here. It's a phenomenal first way to just get connected if you have questions about mental health for yourself or other people. It's not a crisis line, but if you're looking for some emotional support or referrals or just questions, please reach out. We also have over 40 in-person and virtual support groups that we're very proud of. We have people joining from across the United States and even globally. We have classes, volunteer opportunities, and more. Our workplace mental health team specifically partners with employers who are looking to promote mental health in the workplace. And that's how we had our report set up that we're going to be talking to you all about today. So feel free to check out our website at naminyc.org if you're interested in learning more. Great. So let's get into the report overview here. Last year, we were so honored to partner with 14 mental health and disability employee resource groups to learn more about how they're operating and the impact that they're creating in the workplace. We did this by developing an in-depth survey with 45 qualitative and quantitative questions. We will not go through all of the questions with you today, but they are based on a literature review of ERGs as well as our experiences at NAMI-NYC working with employers. And what we did was we took all of the learnings and broke them down to tactical recommendations across 3 key areas that we identified. Governance, so how ERGs are set up and how they run. Collaboration, which came to the forefront pretty predominantly, that ERGs are collaborating across organizations, whether it be with HR, DEI, leaders, providing information about what are best practices and policies that they want to see in advocacy in the workplace, as well as programming all the wonderful things that ERGs do, from events to informal sharing sessions, their Slack channels. How do they do their programming? And the goal of this report was to inspire and guide organizations to create and enhance mental health ERGs and really elevate the phenomenal work that's being done today. We found some of the top priorities to be reduce stigma and create a safe environment in the workplace, provide employees with access to resources, encourage employees to be their authentic selves. And another key finding of the report is the positive impact that ERGs have on elevating the role of the lived experience in the workplace to normalize and destigmatize mental health challenges, which is really close to our hearts here at NAMI-NYC. And it shows how ERGs are contributing to more inclusive, empathetic, and mentally healthy workplaces. So if you want to read the full report, it's a bit long. Feel free to scan the QR code. We'll be referencing it out throughout today's session. And yeah, thanks so much. So before we get into the strategies for success, I'd really like to welcome Kara and Seth. We're so happy to have you here today from JustWorks and Shutterstock. They are both co-chairs of their employee resource groups. So I'll hand it over to Kara to start to do a quick introduction.
Hi, everybody. Very excited to be here with all of you. I saw that there's a lot of co-leads and members of ERGs, so very happy to connect. My name is Kara, and I am a co-lead and founder of Justability, the mental health ERG here at JustWorks. And I'm also an HR consultant on our customer-facing HR team. So I essentially help our customers with HR questions. JustWorks is a PEO. We're essentially fancy payroll to make it simple for everybody. And we essentially help our customers with HR and compliance needs. And that's what I do on a day-to-day. I'll hand it over to Seth.
Thanks, Kara, and thanks to NAMI and Lime Connect for having me. This is awesome. I am co-chair of the Minds Over Matter employee resource group at Shutterstock. By day, I'm a software engineer at Shutterstock, so excited to see that data is something everyone's interested in, because data is near and dear to my heart. Anyway, I'm legally blind, and so I joined Minds Over Matter. Was initially our co-founders Talita and Jasmine founded it as a mental health group, and I joined a year or two ago, and around the same time someone joined who is hard of hearing, and we together expanded Minds Over Matter to include disabilities, and now the torch has been passed to me and Angela, so we are now the co-chairs of Minds, which encompasses both mental health and disability. So excited to share more about that. Thanks.
Thank you so much both for being here today. We can't wait to hear from you both on our strategies.
So, hi everyone. I'm Rachel Steinmetz. I'm the Director of Workplace Mental Health at NAMI-NYC. I gave a wave before. And I'm really excited to share some of the information that we found in our report, but also really excited to facilitate a conversation with Seth and Kara. I think one of the challenges that we see a lot with ERGs, kind of in general, but since our focus is sort of disability and mental health ERGs, is how do you really use these as an opportunity to both create community for staff members, but also for the organization? How can we utilize sort of the power that comes from people who are really living the direct experience of having a disability or mental illness in the workplace to use that to drive policy change, to make workplaces better, frankly, for everyone? And so I'm excited because Seth and Kara have a ton of really amazing suggestions about how they've been able to do that. So the first strategy I'm going to talk a little bit about that we found based on our report is that we wanted to recommend creating an ERG or a committee or a subsection of the ERG dedicated exclusively to mental health. One of the things we found is that mental health and mental illness, everyone has mental health. So mental health affects us all. So technically, I suppose everyone could be part of an affinity group related to mental health. But many people who live with mental illness don't necessarily consider themselves part of the disability community. And also many conversations about other types of disabilities just don't really think about sort of mental illness and how that fits into it. So sometimes it can get a little bit forgotten. I think this relates also to there are elements of mental illness that can be different than other disabilities. So one is that, people who live with a mental illness, it can be episodic. So at certain times, your symptoms can feel a lot worse and you might need more support. And at other times, you really feel like you're fully in recovery and you don't need any of those extra resources. At NAMI-NYC, we always say that we're all on this continuum. And so we're all probably going to need more or less support at different times in our lives. But again, I think that relates to how sort of in a workplace policy and in affinity groups, mental illness and mental health can kind of just get forgotten a little bit. Also, a lot of people who live with a mental illness or other type of disability may not sort of closely identify with the disability community. I know that for me, kind of coming up in this, and this was a long time ago, 15, 20 years, but it wouldn't have occurred to me to look into a disability ERG group to get support for my mental illness. So that sort of communication issue can make it hard for people to reach out. So what we really recommend is either having a separate mental health ERG or, and I think Kara and Seth will talk about this really successfully, really making a concerted effort to make sure that you're including mental health and mental illness as part of your disability ERG, just for all the reasons that I just said, to make sure that we're creating an open and safe space for everyone. So I want to start out, and I'll start out with you, Seth, to just ask, so how did you all prioritize mental health in your ERG?
So it's funny you mentioned the difficulty of even identifying mental health as an issue. Our latest post to our Slack group was about breaking the stigma of mental health. So I would say that even though me and Angela come from kind of a disability background, the original Minds Over Matter co-founders of our ERG have really laid a good groundwork for the ERG as a mental health organization, and so we approach everything, I think, just implicitly from mental health and sound mental health being the bedrock that everything else rests on, whether it's performance at work or whether it's dealing with other disabilities, everything like that. So we're a small enough ERG that we don't have a specific committee dedicated only to mental health, but we definitely, I think, embrace that in everything we do.
Yeah, it's a good point, just talking about that with other disabilities, the intersection of, mental illness and mental health. Kara, what are your thoughts on this?
Sorry, I went to unmute and I turned my camera off. How it goes. Yeah, so disability, we actually started in conversation when we were starting ERG as a mental health ERG. That was really the foundation. I was personally going through a disabling event, and I was like, well, we can't just have an ERG that's mental health. We have to also focus on disability because the two are so intersectional, not always the same, but all can be the same at the same time. So we had that conversation amongst the few of us who were working on the ERG and really wanted to focus on both. But I think one of the pillars that we found was that coming together as community, really was the main focus in any of the cases that we have. So we try to always have support sessions, which alleviate some the stress that can impact mental health and disability. So support sessions have been our main priority as far as mental health goes. And we try to do that at least once a month, if not more, if people need the support, if something's going on. Yeah, so that's how we do it.
Could you just say a little bit more about what a support session is?
Sure, absolutely. So we actually connect our support sessions to our monthly meetings. We don't always have a lot of announcements in our monthly meetings, so we try to prioritize at least 30 to 45 minutes to have open conversation. Depending on the month, we'll have, it might be a topical conversation. So we might say, it's the end of the quarter. We know burnout is happening, and we'll start with, little open, educational moment about burnout, and then we'll talk about burnout. And how people are feeling, and of course that in talking about stories and how people may have overcome burnout. So people just raise their hand and jump into conversation, and we really try to do that. Obviously, we have some guardrails around support sessions. If there's ever a situation where somebody says something that we need to let JustWorks know about, or we'll go directly to people ops and let them know. So that's a guardrail that we need to have in place based on the topic of conversation. But that's never happened. Hopefully, it never does. But it's really important to have that that caveat too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say, having worked with lots of different ERGs and storytelling, that is always a concern. And I think for many of you here, if you're kind of trying to talk to your leadership about this, that can be a concern. I will say it has never happened in many of the ERGs that I've worked with. There have maybe been some cases where people just wanted to reach out to say, hey, like, can you share the information for our benefits again? But yeah, just really encourage people that other companies are doing this and creating these storytelling opportunities, and that there is a safe way to do that, as Kara said, with these guardrails. So another one of the strategies that sort of came up based on our report that we want to recommend, related to the excellent segue that Kara provided, is to get internal buy-in and organizational support with small wins early. I think starting any ERG, especially a mental health ERG or disability ERG, can be overwhelming because there's so many different takes that you can have and so many different ideas that you can have. And sometimes it can be hard to just identify what you want to do and just get started. And what I found working with different ERGs, and also in my other work, sort of doing quality improvement in mental health, is that showing those quick wins early on can really lay the groundwork to get other people to support your ERG, build the business case for why this is important, and later on get funding and sort of more opportunities to really be able to provide feedback on what your company is doing and how you can best really support people living with mental illness. So some of the ways that people talk about this are just with starting out with sort of small events, like a lunch and learn, something that doesn't require a lot of sort of organizational support and buy-in. Sharing some information, even just creating an educational one-pager about some of these pieces. So posting resources on platforms and partnering with community organizations like NAMI-NYC. Again, these are great ways to sort of kind of easily at the first step sort of build in that support to let people see that you're serious. And also they allow you to pivot if you need to. So for instance, let's say you hold your first event and nobody comes. It happens to all of us, then you're able to see that information, think about, okay, do we need to communicate more? Is there other types of information that we want to share about? But don't overcomplicate. I think really just getting started was a lot of the feedback that we received from people in the report. And oftentimes you'll probably be surprised by how many people participate and are really interested in hearing this information. So Kara, I'll start with you. So how did you get support to start your ERG? What did leadership say? Kind of what was that process like? And I guess also any tips for someone who might be kind of trying to do this process or build up that support?
Yeah. So there had been a lot of conversation at JustWorks about starting a mental health ERG as I kind of started at JustWorks about 5 years ago. And nobody had ever taken the step to do it, right? And really, JustWorks didn't have a formal process. It was really just like, give us 10 people and we'll be okay with it. Really, that was the process. So I connected one day with our ERG program manager, and I was like, hey, there's a lot of conversation about this. I would be happy to be the person just to put it out there and, see what happens. I went to Slack and just wrote a message in our generalized DEIB channel, and basically 300 people gave us support. I only needed 10. 300 people were like, yes, we need this. Please, let's do it. And then that turned into a DEIB hosted luncheon where we just had a conversation of like why this was so important. And our leadership, a lot of people from leadership showed up to that as well, and didn't realize that we needed it so badly. And it wasn't that JustWorks, JustWorks had a lot of resources at the time. They were doing a lot of programming around mental health, especially because it was right after the pandemic. It was a hot topic in HR. So things were happening, but we wanted more support on that front. So basically, the tips that I have are, do it, find who you need to talk to and just say, hey, I want to do this. And, it takes a lot of courage to do it. And once you do put it out there, people will come and help. Say that you need help and people will come help and do anything that you need. So I had a team helping me with the charter, and everybody just kind of stepped up and did it. So I would say definitely, if you're thinking about it, find the person at your company to have a conversation with, and tie it to a business case. If you can say, hey, like, we're willing to do this, like, using the ERG document that NAMI-NYC created could certainly be helpful. There's a lot of data there, and how it can actually help the business. I think that's a really good way to get leadership support as well. So those are my tips.
Thank you. No, that's great.
Yeah.
Seth, I'd love to, and again, shout out to Angela and Talita, who I've also had the pleasure of speaking with, your predecessors. But yeah, just can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and like unlike Kara, I inherited a already thriving and well-built ERG, so I can't really speak to founding one from scratch. But I do really agree with Kara's point that really just take action. Even it's the kind of the ready, fire, aim approach. You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna do things that don't get engagement. You're gonna step on people's toes maybe, but it's better to do that in service of achieving a really venerable, noble aim and valuable aim of trying to provide mental health support in your company than kind of sitting on the sidelines. So in terms of small wins and things like that, we do, to your point, Rachel, we do a lot of sharing of resources, Slack articles, podcasts, things like that. But it takes kind of a minimum of effort for us to prepare and provides a lot of value to employees. Another thing that we do, we haven't done this in a while, but we've had success with is, for those of you who don't know, Shutterstock is a stock image and video and other asset company. And so our kind of mission is to empower creatives to tell their stories. And so we kind of wanted to internalize that mission. So we've done a couple of events where we'll have kind of a idea board or vision board or gratitude board where employees can share images or post-its of their successes or their even mental health challenges. So that's been a really successful way to drive engagement. And I, in terms of organizational structure, I just want to finish by saying we have a great DEI head, Mikkel, who's awesome. And also all of the ERGs at Shutterstock have an executive sponsor. And obviously they can't be involved in the day-to-day. They're kind of C-suite level folks with lots to do, but they do offer some visibility and occasionally participate in events. So it's a really helpful way to get some stickiness to your ERG.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that is a really wonderful segue to some of our next strategies for success that we're talking about. But I think, yeah, both of you mentioned in your conversations, leadership, the role of leadership and really making sure that your ERG is successful, and also that you have, an opportunity to try to make a real difference. I loved what you said, Seth, about sort of the activities you're doing, kind of building into the overall mission of the organization. I hadn't thought about that way, but that could be a really good way for people to kind of use activities. Whatever your company does, is there a way that you can kind of get a mental health angle or kind of build on that, and that can make it seem a little less scary. Before I get to this, I also want to note we're getting some questions coming in, which we love, and we'll definitely address those both during the session and in the last couple of minutes, but feel free, please use the chat, the Q&A, and you can also, if you want to just put it in the chat as well, we'll check that out. But yeah, keep the questions coming and we'll definitely do our best to address them. So based on both what Kara and Seth just said, leadership is really important to really helping the ERG thrive, and also making sure that you're able to make significant organizational changes. So I think one of the most exciting premises of ERGs is that we can really make not only a safe space for people living with mental illness or disability, but also just make companies more welcoming for people in any of these situations, and make systems better to make it easier to access resources, or easier to even just ask for help if you need it. I think this is something that employers are increasingly realizing over the past couple of years. Again, many mental health ERGs that we surveyed in our report had started up pretty recently, around 2020. So this is a new issue that people are really excited about, and excited to figure out how they can learn more from their employees. So executive sponsors can really help to elevate ERG input to leadership. So, again, as Seth mentioned, they can help sort of remind your leadership, hey, we have this thing, we can be helping to provide support and feedback on some of these things. So engaging that executive sponsor can be really critical in helping with some of that feedback. It can be ideal if they have a personal connection. I think that passion can just go a long way in helping others really find support in your ERG program and have the company really prioritize that this is something that they want to invest in for a while. So what are some of the ways that ERGs can provide feedback on, or what we think are some of the really important areas? So I think feedback on policies, one, I think just, are people able to find the policies related to how to access benefits or how to access an accommodation? That's something we increasingly see across companies, that a lot of that information is really spread out. It's really hard to find and access. So even, just how people can access that information. Thinking about benefits, is there some sort of like app or headspace, or if you're noticing, hey, it's impossible to find an in-network psychiatrist, which again is a real, sort of global issue. But again, your employers who are providing these benefits want to know these things. And I think I can, maybe ask Kara to talk a little bit more about this, especially in your dual role as HR. I mean, people are spending a lot of money on these benefits. They want them to be good. They want people to be using them. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, JustWorks is really interesting because we are a PEO and we provide it's interesting, we provide health insurance for our customers, but we also use our own health insurance that we provide through Aetna and United Healthcare, et cetera. So we're actually our resources on that level are excellent. And sorry if you hear my dog in the background. But we have excellent resources on that we actually provide to our customers, but they work internally. So we're actually very fortunate to have that as an organization. So we do share those in the ERG pretty frequently. Other things that we have done, at least for our individual resources, is that we've crowdsourced a list, crowdsourced a database for providers for mental health and illness, particularly, if somebody needs specialty care. We have a section for like ADHD and other neurodivergencies as well. So we have crowdsourced that, and that gets updated, I would say probably quarterly, from our people ops team. And it's actually pretty great. I'm a big fan. That predates the ERG, but we kind of revamped it over time. The other thing is we worked with NAMI last year, and we did a employee self-advocacy workshop with Rachel and Elena. It was actually really great, and we actually resurfaced that this year as additional resource for our ERG, to, if they need accommodations or if they just need additional support there as well. So those are two things that we've done among a million, but those are excellent resources that we have.
Thank you. And yeah, and Seth, you mentioned that you had really great executive leadership. Can you just talk a little bit about that and how you work with them?
Yeah, so for example, I don't think you'd mind me saying this, our executive sponsor has Parkinson's, and so I say that because he uses a cane and I use a cane because I'm legally blind. So he uses a support cane, I use a mobility cane, and so for during NDEAM, National Disability Employment Awareness Month, I had to think about the acronym for a minute. Anyway, that happened is in October, and October 15th is White Cane Safety Day. Traditionally around blindness, but as fellow cane users, our sponsor and I teamed up on doing a brief kind of Ask Me Anything session about using canes and what canes do. So that's just kind of one concrete example, but we have quarterly check-ins with our executive sponsors, and they can be valuable in connecting us with resources that we might not have thought of. Also, to Kara's point and your point, Rachel, about providing other resources, Shutterstock partners with Calm. You mentioned Headspace. Calm is a kind of competitor to Headspace and provides good, meditation, sleep, relaxation, all sorts of resources for that on a daily basis. One of our newest acquisitions, at least on the benefits side, is something called Thrive Pass, which compensates for gym memberships and things like that, but also really leans into the mental health. So you can use it for kind of therapeutic stuff. I'm looking into craniosacral treatment at some point soon, and Thrive Pass will cover that. So there's just we're always looking for ways that we can serve our employees better. And of course, as Kara said, we also partner with NAMI on stuff. So really exciting. Again, just proud to be in an organization that prioritizes DEI and mental health to the level that we do.
That's so cool. Yeah, you hadn't told us about your sort of ask me anything about cane usage. And I think, again, that's sort of it might seem, kind of lower hanging fruit. It's not sort of like, how are we, adding a new mental health benefit? But I think that's exactly how we sort of normalize these conversations. It doesn't have to be this big, serious thing. It can just, be like, hey, I'm here, ask me anything. All right, so again, Kara and Seth have already touched on a lot about this, but one of the strategies for success that really comes across in all ERGs is just the role of peer support and lived experience. So I think the word peer can be a little just hard to understand. And so at NAMI-NYC, we really talk about peers as people who either live with a mental illness, but also those who are caregivers of those. And I think that goes, in all the disability community as well. It's not just the individual, but how does it affect their community and their family members? Something that we think is really important about the role of peers is that it's this idea that it's mutually beneficial. So often when we are in treatment, or in our workplaces, where there's an obvious hierarchy, like our boss is our boss. But the role of peer support is really that no one here is more important than the other. No one here has the right answer more than any other, but we're here to talk about these things and kind of work together to figure out what it is that we need and how can we get it and how can we support each other. So peer support in the workplace, I think, can be really helpful to just try to create a culture of belonging and wellness and empathy. And one of the big themes that come together is this idea of storytelling. So how we share our stories. I mean, I think Seth just, talked about even part of it, just ask me anything about cane usage. But I think many of the different ERGs we talked about sort of incorporate storytelling events for folks. And I know that we have some questions about sort of how to do this in a safe way. We'll definitely talk about that as part of our Q&A session, and we'll provide some tips there as well. But yeah, so Kara, I'd love to hear. So how do you all incorporate lived experience in your ERG? You started us out, but if there's anything you want to add or your experience in that.
Yeah, I mean, JustWorks as a whole, as a company, storytelling is really a pillar of what we try to do in any kind of presentation that we're doing. This is a big push for JustWorks just in general. And over the last year or so, we have tried to incorporate that into our ERG because it's so important for people to feel like they belong. And that's the best way to do it is through storytelling. Over the last year, we did an event for National Disability and Employment Awareness Month, which is in October, the same month that Seth did his cane AMA, which is awesome. We actually did a self-expression event. So we actually had just all of JustWorks submit artwork, and we did an art event where people could just come. It was like basically a gallery where people could post their art. It could be mental health, it could be disabilities, it could be just you want to show your art. It was totally fine. And everybody was able to put like a little, a explanation of their piece. You could do a poem, we had a video presentation in the office as well. So people got to see people's, visual art. So we've done that. And then for Autism Awareness Month, we also call it Autism Acceptance Month at JustWorks, but we also did Neurodivergent Joy, where people could submit stories of how, their neurodivergence impacts their life and how it actually can be a good thing. We're trying to reduce the stigma of some of that as well. And we had people submit about having PTSD, having autism, having ADHD. And we posted those stories anonymously just with the department. So there are ways to do it that it's not, overly telling of who you are, and it's not that necessarily tied to you, but you are able to tell that story of how it impacts you in your life. And maybe there's good and bad that comes with it. And, we want people to be able to share both sides. So we've done several things like that. And, we try in our peer support sessions. It's a little less anonymous because we're there in person. But, people feel pretty comfortable. We just try to, we always say what's said here stays here. Again, if there's an emergency, obviously we have to tell people that, to tell people ups that. But other than that, it's, it's a pretty safe space, and we create that for people. So, and we also are available as one-on-one. So if somebody ever really needs support, the leads and some of our committee members are also available for that as well.
That's great. We got a question in the chat. Can you say how those stories are shared, I guess, with the broader community?
Yeah. So we have done it in multiple formats, but for the neurodivergent Joy, it was just me and my co-lead. We essentially accepted those stories. We tried to do it as anonymously as we could, but we knew who some of them came from. But we posted them in Slack. And then also throughout the office, we have screens throughout the office. So it was just a story. And then it just said the person's department, and it didn't say who they were. Anything that might have been revealing, we would like removed out of it. So, and we created like images that kind of went with our branding and things like that. So we use Slack a lot. That's just kind of how we communicate through our ERG. It's just the fastest and easiest way. We also did, for last month, we had, during our support session, we actually had somebody who wanted to share, they actually wrote a book, and they shared 2 stories out of their book live on Zoom with us. So that was really cool. And he allowed us to record that, and we shared it with the ERG for people who couldn't make it. So, and also he wanted a copy of the recording because it was his book. But so we really love storytelling, and really think that's the best way to create community around, mental illness and disabilities as well. So,
and Seth, you already mentioned, I mean, the Shutterstock's like ethos is literally about sort of storytelling and sharing your story. Is there anything you want to add to that about how you've all approached that?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would add, and this is kind of an opportunity we're embracing this year, so haven't done a ton with it so far, but Shutterstock has a bunch of other ERGs besides Minds Over Matter. So we have an ERG dedicated to women's support, to LGBTQ plus support, Pan-Asian, things like that. And of course, there's intersectionality with all of those and mental health, right? And so we are always looking for ways to, during, for example, African History Month in February, looking for ways to provide support and just partner with other ERGs to say, look, we know that the group that you're in has its own mental health challenges, and we'd like to support and raise awareness of that. So, like I said, we haven't done a ton of that kind of cross-pollination yet, but it is a major goal for us this year.
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the other big recommendations in our report. Is a lot of people from the mental health disability ERGs said that their most successful events were actually partnering with other ERGs and talking about some sort of intersection. Even one was talking about, for parents, for parents of children who are living with mental illness, that was a really powerful moment. So I think that's another great way to both sort of get your ERG out there, but also to acknowledge the really complex relationship with mental health and mental illness to all certain levels of identities.
Right.
We got a question for Kara, actually, about how did your ERG go about setting up peer support sessions? Are they remote or in person?
We do hybrid. I would say, I will be fully honest, it's a little challenging to do hybrid, just because there are people coming off of mute. So if there's a group in like a conference room, it's hard to talk over or like jump in. It's always a challenge. We do try to do some just like in-person support sessions too, like Coffee with Adjustability, where we'll get together in a conference room and have coffee. Getting that off the ground, we were fine. We also do, because we also, incorporate neurodivergence, we were also doing body doubling sessions, and we just found that a lot of people weren't coming to those, and it was really hard to get, people to show up. So that's why we partnered the peer support sessions with our monthly meeting, so that at least it gives us something that's once a month. It's always on the calendar. Our meetings, we try to keep short. Nobody wants to sit through 30-minute meeting about business stuff. We do a quick recap, and that's if people want to know more, they can always reach out. But that's why we partnered it with our monthlies, just because we really want to make sure that we are giving the space for what our ERG is really about as the community. So that's kind of our mission there. There's some times where people don't want to talk, and that's okay. We'll leave it open for 15-20 minutes. And if nobody wants to say anything, we'll be like, all right, we're going to close it down. If anybody wants to start one, and we also leave it out there too, if anybody ever wants to start a peer support session, if something like that is happening in the world or something they just need to chat, we always give space for that. So, well, one of the co-leads, me or my co-lead Jackie, we might jump in and do it ourselves. Somebody reaches out to us and says, hey, can we start one? We'll go ahead and do it. So we can always do them off the cuff too. So
no, that's helpful. And I think that there was also a question that we can think about is like, sometimes we do these things and we don't get the engagement that we hope. And I think part of that is just anytime you start something new, like it's going to take a while to build up. I think also, especially talking about mental health and mental illness and disability in the workplace, still feels really scary and people feel really unsure about how to do that. And so I think just some of the strategies that you mentioned, Kara, keeping it short, combining it with sort of other activities, also, acknowledge having different ways of participation, trying different things. I think we all, that's kind of what's nice about this is you can try something if it doesn't work, that's okay. I think other ways to increase participation, as I think both of you mentioned, but Seth in particular, that leadership has come to a lot of events and that really can help kind of show others, one, that it's okay, but also that this is something the company really cares about. It's not just sort of that lip service. So those are some strategies. And again, I know that we have a bunch of folks who are also on ERGs. Please in the chat, if you have any strategies, how are you getting folks there? What do you find most helpful? Before we move on to our last recommendation, I want to share that at NAMI-NYC, we're really excited in September of this year. We're hoping to launch a big program where we're kind of combining all these great ERGs that we get to work with to both bring them together virtually and hopefully in person to do some really fun events to create more of a community, and also so that we as NAMI-NYC can create sort of an ERG for people who might not have one in their company. And so definitely, I think when you all registered, you had to sign up for our newsletter, but if you're interested, definitely let us know because we're really excited about thinking about some fun in-person and hybrid activities we can to just foster that community. So our last sort of strategy for success before we hop into some of the great questions we have, and actually does address one of the questions that we have, is about the role of data. And so I think that this is something in general that people really overcomplicate. And I think that can be hard because, data just seems really overwhelming. It can seem really scary, or we can have to like get a statistician involved or something. And so what I really recommend, honestly, for companies, when we talk to Elena and I talk to companies about how to sort of support the mental health of their employees, but also for mental health disability ERGs, is just start small, don't overcomplicate it, and try to identify specific goals that use available data to demonstrate success. Obviously, measuring mental health, workplace mental health is challenging, and probably as an ERG, you don't want to sort of jump into saying we would like to have all of our benefits data to look at the utilization so that we can cross map that, with who's attending our sessions. I mean, that would be a hugely complicated task. And I would just not recommend that as a starting out point. But again, I think, more so that you can use data is great. So start with things that are easy to collect. So just counts, like how many people are coming to these LinkedIn events, or how many people are using Slack. Kara mentioned her first post on Slack, 300 people. I mean, that's some great data to show that people are interested in this. Doing surveys after events, anonymous surveys to ask people what they're interested in. You can also sort of look at some program evaluation questions. So let's say, I know that some programs have mental health first aiders. I know that some of the folks on our chat here are certified mental health first aiders. So you can see, like, are people using these services? I think especially as an ERG, when you're an employee where this is not your full-time job, and also, there are issues of confidentiality that you're just going to want to be really aware of. For instance, not, all claims should be de-identified, but all information about mental health in the workplace should be de-identified. Don't overcomplicate it for yourself. And if people like your program, if people are using it, I think that's a strong enough reason for you to make a really strong case to your business about why this is important. So Seth, I'll start out with you, since you use this in both your ERG and workplace head. What are some of your thoughts about how folks can use data?
So several thoughts on the big scary end of data. Scary in quotes, just in the sense that it's complicated, as you said. We did a DEI survey last year, and again, I use we on a company level. And again, we have a great head of diversity that kind of spearheaded this, but he was able to share some results from that survey that indicated that we have a gap in identification and support for people with invisible disabilities. So that's something that we were able to action on, and now make it one of our goals for this year is to provide more support in that area. So that's one kind of clear example of how data can be actionable. And I think that's another point is that, you don't have to do all this data collection stuff yourself. I mean, this DEI survey, like you said, requires a lot of resources and it's challenging to do, but that's why we have a DEI director. In terms of the small wins, though, like you said, like keeping it simple is great. So we use a web app called Monday.com, which for those of you who aren't familiar is a project management service. And to Rachel's point, just collecting things like, okay, how many people attended this Zoom meeting? How many reactions did this Slack thread get? Things like that, just tracking that over time can be really helpful. And we are in the process of putting together kind of a ERG level anonymous survey to collect more information about what kind of events people would like to attend, how do they prefer their communication, because at the end of the day we are servants to the other employees, and we want to do what's going to be best and most helpful for them.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful from your dual perspectives. Kara, do you have anything you'd like to add to this before we move on and start addressing some of the questions from the crowd?
Yeah, we're actually pretty much in the same position as Seth. We have used the DEIB survey for our entire company as kind of a resource, to help us find out where some gaps are. We've also given feedback to DEIB that they're not asking some questions that we think they should be asking. So that's hopefully coming in the future, so we actually can get more data on that. We're also looking at offering more survey data to our general population too. We have a new executive sponsor this year who really wants us to focus on the data and see where we can really support the business, but also support our community a little bit more in those areas. So we're very much on the same page with Seth, and Seth, we should probably stay in contact
Yes,
to talk about our efforts.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, for us as NAMI-NYC, that's what we want to do and share. And part of this webinar is really our first step towards that. So I'm going to pass it over to Elena to help us sort of wrap up and also sort of start to walk us through some of the questions that we got through the Q&A.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much for everyone staying on, listening to these strategy. Thanks, Rachel, Kara, and Seth for sharing your insights. And we have lots of questions up here on the screen. I do want to point out we have some ways to stay involved. Feel free to scan the QR code to see we have so many links. I'll also drop the link here. You can see how to sign up for the Lyme community, how to connect with us on workplace mental health, or if you're an ERG and want to be connected with other ERGs, let us know. So the first, and we'll also be releasing a poll for folks to evaluate the session today. But before we do that, one question that we got was tips on balancing privacy and legal liability while still providing the most inclusive, supportive space possible for mental health conversations and events.
I can start out with that one just because it's something I talk a lot about. I think there's always going to be a little bit of tension from kind of legal teams about this, which makes sense that their sort of space in this. But I can say that there are safe ways to have conversations about mental health in the workplace, and it's actually really important that you're having these conversations. Some of the guardrails that I think you should set up are just to let anyone know that if they talk about either hurting themselves or hurting someone else, that you care about them and you're going to be reaching out to resources. I think trainings can be really helpful for that. So as part of our mental health 101 training, we go really specifically into what are some tips about what to say, like talking about behaviors. We don't want to say to someone else, like, oh, you seem depressed, are you? So we really provide some information about like what the ADA is, how to have these conversations in a safe space. And really for folks who might have some concern about this or some concern for their from their leadership, the role of all of us as non-therapists in the workplace are really just to help people and provide support. That we aren't there to kind of provide them counseling services. Nobody wants their coworker to be their therapist. But we can sort of just check in with folks and ask them if they're okay. And so I think, the main guardrail for that is really, again, if they're hurting themselves or others or something that will need to be connected. I will, again, caveat that with people really, I have not seen this happen a lot. I mean, I think for the most part, people are so respectful. They really want to just be supportive and have those conversations. So it's important to kind of proactively talk about that. It doesn't happen as much as you might think. So it's a concern, but don't have that be a barrier to doing this work.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. So another question we got was for companies that are primarily remote and work from home, what are some programming and activities that you can suggest in a virtual environment? I know in our report, we heard so much about Slack channels where people are sharing things and they actually can't even measure how impactful it is because they've had people approach them and say, hey, that really made an impact on me, that thing you shared. And you can't tell, like some people want to stay anonymous, but they still want the resources. So I think that's one that comes to mind, but curious, Kara, Seth, if you have any ideas for remote and virtual work, how you can get people engaged.
Yeah, I mean, I work remote. Shutterstock does have offices in New York and elsewhere, but I work remote. And to your point, Slack threads and postings are useful. Also, I mentioned the kind of activity boards, kind of storyboard stuff we did last year, to for people to just share gratitude by putting a sticky note on a board. Things like that are really, and then at the end of the month, the end of the campaign, whatever it is, you've got this beautiful board with lots of the engagement kind of shows itself, and so things like that are really helpful. And of course, I'm always looking for more ways to do that, so be interested to see what other people say too.
Great. Kara, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the way we've approached it is really the education piece, obviously Slack and doing things like storyboards. All of our events, we try to do hybrid at least in some capacity. So if for the art event, we had a slide going and we just had it open on Zoom so people could just jump in and see what was going on. We always try to do something hybrid at least at the minimum. I think with education, we tried to do all of our events on Zoom if possible. So that's really what I could suggest. We've also done a movie night where we watched Inside Out last year, and we also streamed. I don't know if we're allowed to do this, but we streamed it over Zoom. So I don't know if we're allowed to do that. So don't take that from me. But we did find a way to stream it so people could watch it with us. But yeah, so we've tried to do everything hybrid if possible, just to make it accessible we have a Tampa office as well as Canada now. So we're trying to bring everybody together if we can.
Thank you so much for sharing. And so we have about a minute left here. If you haven't completed the Zoom evaluation poll, we'd really appreciate any feedback on the event. Just get your thoughts. And so we'll close out with one final question around for a company that has a disability ERG, but maybe not a mental health ERG, how do we intersect them? How do we have a disability ERG push efforts for mental health within their current disability efforts?
I can jump in because we kind of started as both, right? But I think that tying something that has been a good strategy for us is talking about how they're one and the same in a lot of ways, but also different, and like really also explaining that to the core all the time really helps. Because that's how we got leadership involved, right? We had to explain that they're the same in a lot of ways because mental illness can be disabling, but it's not always. And that's why we need to have both, and it needs to be together. So I think there's a really good strategy there to really, if you are advocating to have both, that's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, totally agree with Kara. I just wasn't able to articulate it in my head as quickly or as eloquently, but yeah, that's they're definitely intertwined, particularly with our more recent focus on invisible disabilities. So yeah, I think there's a good case to be made there, that this kind of work really goes hand in hand.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate the time. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month. We've dropped the link in the chat with all of the resources you can access. Thank you to Lyme Connect, Seth and Kara for being here today and sharing so much with us. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's nice seeing you all.